Baker Jack Phillips is harassed again.
Mr. Reagan.
All right, so you guys might remember this story. This is a story of a baker in Colorado who was harassed by some of the activist citizens of Colorado because he refused to bake a wedding cake for a gay couple, and this became a big national issue. This guy's place is called the Masterpiece Cake Shop, and this guy's a good guy. He's a Christian, and he didn't want to have to produce a product in which he expressed ideas that he didn't believe in. So here's the thing about this. I wanted to make this video primarily because I wanted to discuss, the difference between what this guy's fighting for and what social media is doing. Because I think to a lot of people, this is essentially the same thing. This is a private company, and this guy has a certain level of freedom of expression provided to him by the US Constitution, and he doesn't want to violate his personal beliefs. He doesn't want to have to say things that he doesn't believe in. And I think a lot of people look at social media the same way. They say, well, social media has the right of association, choosing who they associate with. If they don't want to associate with certain kinds of people, with certain kinds of ideas, they shouldn't have to. They're a private company, just like Jack Phillips. However, there's a huge distinction between what Jack Phillips is fighting for and what social media is doing to us by censoring conservative ideas. And we'll get into the details of this in one moment. First, of course, I have to sell you something. Did you ever dream of diving deep in the ocean and finding riches and wealth enough to live the life of a king? Well, Noble Gold can help you get closer to that dream. They've located scarce solid gold coins from the SS Central America that sunk during a hurricane in the 1800s. And people called that the Ship of Gold. And a dive boat found out why in 1988. In the hull, they came across a sunken treasure, gold coins and nuggets. These don't come on the market very often. And so if you want some sunken treasure, you got to jump at the chance. Divers discovered these spectacularly valuable mint $20 gold Liberty coins at the ocean's bottom. They're part of one of America's most notable stories. And now you can own one of these magnificent coins as well as have it delivered to you directly to your home. So if you've ever wanted to own genuine treasure, now here's your chance. Call Noble Gold at 877-646-5347 to reserve your treasure. That's 877-646-5347. All right, so before I get into the distinction between what's going on with Jack Phillips here and what's going on with social media, I want to read a little bit about Jack Phillips and about his plight. Now, I was reminded of this case by Dinesh D'Souza. He just produced a video talking about this, and Dinesh D'Souza has been putting out some great videos lately. If you're not subscribed to his YouTube channel, I highly recommend it. Just day after day, he's producing gold. I mean, he's become one of my go-to people to watch on YouTube recently. Always somebody I've watched pretty consistently, but now he's got a new podcast that he's doing. And yeah, I'm watching him a lot, so quick shout out to him, because if it weren't for him, I wouldn't have had the idea to do this video. But it's a thought that I've had, because it is a difficult distinction, I think, for people to make in their minds. Well, what's the difference between this private business and the private business of a social media company? And again, we'll get to that in one moment. First, of course, I want to read this article. This is PJ Media. The headline to this is trans lawyer who tried to correct the errors of Jack Phillips's thinking wins in court for now. All right, so the first round of this lawsuit, I guess Jack Phillips lost, so he's got to go to court again. And I think this is kind of tough for this guy, because this has got to be expensive, continuously going to court. Anyway, 9 years ago, a gay couple went into a Masterpiece Cake Shop and asked Jack Baker to craft a cake to celebrate their same-sex wedding. Phillips refused based on his Christian conviction that marriage is between a man and a woman, but he offered to sell the man anything else in the shop. They reported him to the Colorado Civil Rights Commission, sparking a 6-year legal battle up to the Supreme Court. Shortly after the Supreme Court found in favor of Phillips, a transgender lawyer targeted the Christian baker, beginning the battle all over again. And this is really where things are kind of getting out of control, because ever since this guy gained national attention for this Supreme Court case, he has been continuously harassed by activists. I mean, they are really targeting this guy, nonstop harassment. I have actually found on Twitter that really the most psychopathic activists are the trans activists. Trans activists love to harass people. I don't know what it is about the trans community, where they're so inclined to harass people, but the harassment is intense. They're not good people. Trans activists tend to want to destroy your life. They don't just want to make a point, make a political point. If you disagree with them, they mean to destroy you. Awful, awful people, trans activists. Really the worst kind of scum that I've discovered in any political community is these trans activists. And you'll see that in a moment here as I continue reading this story. On Tuesday, the Denver County District Court ruled that Phillips had violated the Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act, CADA, by refusing to bake a custom cake celebrating the biological man's transition to a woman. The court found Phillips guilty because his wife had provisionally agreed to bake a pink cake with blue frosting before the transgender lawyer, Autumn Scardina, had explained that he intended the cake to symbolize his gender transition. So, pink cake, blue frosting, not a big deal. That's fine. That's a fine color scheme. Except you're trying to communicate a message with this scheme. It's like asking somebody to write on the cake, transitioning is awesome, transgenderism is great, but in the symbolism of the color scheme. So he didn't want to produce that color scheme because he understood that the symbolism was an advocation of this particular lifestyle, this particular gender identity, and he didn't want to promote that idea because it's an expression that he doesn't agree with. The anti-discrimination laws are intended to ensure that members of our society who have historically been treated unfairly, who have been deprived of even the everyday right to access businesses to buy products, are no longer treated as others. This case is about one such product, a pink and blue birthday cake, and not compelled speech, Judge A. Bruce Jones wrote. So this is wrong, and let me explain why this is wrong. This is compelled speech. It's not just him producing a pink and blue birthday cake. If the coloring had no intended messaging, or that messaging had not been expressed to the baker, he would have baked the cake, right? They'd already agreed to do it. The concept was that he was being forced to express a message he didn't agree with, right? And this is really the distinction that needs to be made here. This guy isn't refusing to sell these people a cake, right? They've written here, this judge has written here, members of society who have historically been treated unfairly, who have been deprived of even their everyday right to access businesses to buy products. That's not true. I'm not aware of any case ever in history where a transgender person has been denied access to a business's product or services. You can be denied specific services that include compelling the business to say things the business doesn't agree with, right? And, this is constantly brought up, but should you be forced as a Jewish baker to produce a pro-Nazi cake? Right? That's always the counterpoint, right? Should a black person be forced to produce a pro-Ku Klux Klan cake? These are the questions, right? Should you be forced to violate your principles? And it doesn't have to be words, right? It just has to be a particular expression. If, for instance, I went into a black baker's bake shop and I said, could you produce an all-white cake for me? I want an all-white cake. I'm sure the guy would say, yeah, no problem. Boom, get it checked off, get the order ready. And then if I said, oh, and by the way, it's all white because this is for a Klan rally and we want to celebrate whiteness and about how much whiteness is better than blackness in terms of race, I think that baker would have the right to deny me service because that would violate, unless they were crazy, that would violate their principles, presumably. That's right. That's correct. They shouldn't be forced to bake a cake that violates their principles. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. The only reason we're disagreeing with it here, or why some people disagree with it here, is that this guy's a Christian and he's refusing to bake a cake that expresses a pro-LGBTQ message, in this case, a trans message. But in other circumstances, I don't think anyone would have a problem with a black baker refusing to create a pro-white supremacist cake. Obviously, a Jewish baker refusing to produce a pro-Nazi cake. Obviously, that's fine. So why is it different in this case? Well, it's different because of the values that people have. People think that trans people need to have control over your life. You need to use their pronouns. Certain trans people would have that embedded in the law, that you have to use their pronouns or you go to prison or you pay a fine. That's why Jordan Peterson's famous, because he fought against that. So this judge is way off base here. I think it's very obvious. This is clearly an unconstitutional position. Scardina had specifically targeted Phillips for his convictions, and he claimed that Phillips and his bakery attempted to exploit the news coverage by stating that they would sell birthday cakes to LGBT customers, which I think that they will. Right? They just won't put an LGBT, pro message on the cake. Scardina sued Phillips, claiming that Masterpiece Cake Shop violated this Colorado Consumer Protection Act by engaging in deceptive advertising and that it violated CADA by discriminating against him. But they didn't, right? They didn't say that they wouldn't sell him a cake. They just said they won't sell him a cake with this very specific message. Judge Jones rightly rejected Scardina's absurd charge that Phillips had engaged in a stealth marketing campaign, but he ruled against Phillips on CADA, which doesn't make any sense. Christian Wagner, a general counsel at Alliance Defending Freedom, the law firm representing Phillips, explained that Scardina's lawsuit targeted Phillips for his faith. Well, that's right. I mean, they've been harassing him for a very long time. And I'm going to get into the difference between this case and social media just a second, but I wanted to read about some of the harassment here. Christian Wagner, Jack Phillips' lawyer, said this case and others, including the case of floral artist Baronel Stutzman, whose petition is pending before the U.S. Supreme Court, represents a disturbing trend, the weaponization of our system to ruin those with whom the activist disagrees. That's right. That's absolutely right. We're in the realm here of kind of like legal harassment. People are using the legal system to harass people they disagree with, and it's utterly reprehensible. She says the harassment of people like Jack and Baronel has been occurring for nearly a decade, and it must stop. We will appeal the decision and continue to defend the freedom of all Americans to peacefully live and work according to their deeply held beliefs without fear of punishment, Wagner concluded. Or maybe it's Wagner. I don't know how she pronounces it. According to ADF, that's the law firm, Scardina first approached Masterpiece Cake Shop on June 26, 2017, the very day the Supreme Court agreed to hear Phillips's case. Scardina, a biological male who identifies as a female, requested cake art celebrating his gender transition. The shop declined the request, since creating such a cake would violate Phillips's religious beliefs about gender. A few days later, another call from a number associated with the name Scardina asked for a birthday cake for Satan, complete with a red and black theme and an image of Satan smoking marijuana. Phillips denied this cake as well. On June 4th, 2018, the day the Supreme Court issued its decision, somebody emailed Phillips claiming to be a member of the Church of Satan. The email requested a 3-tiered cake, cheesecake frosting, and the topper should be a large figure of Satan licking a 9-inch black dildo. I would like the dildo to be an actual working model that can be turned on before we unveil the cake. That was what the email read. Scardina's law practice states, we take great pride in taking on employers who discriminate against lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people and serving them their just desserts. Oh, very clever. So, yeah, this is obvious harassment, right? This is clear harassment. This poor guy is just trying to produce cakes for people. You know, he's an artist, and people are demanding that he create art that he doesn't agree with the messaging of, and he won't do it. He'll make them cakes, but he won't make them cakes with a very specific message, right? It's sort of like I'm a writer, okay? If I approached a publisher and I said, I've got a great idea for a book, and they said, okay, that's great. Yeah, write that book. And then they said, okay, we'd like to commission you to do another book. And I said, fantastic. What would it be? And they said, we'd like you to make a book that totally defends leftist ideas. Just write a book that promotes leftist ideas, promotes Marxism, promotes communism. I would say, well, no, I don't believe any of that kind of stuff. I mean, that's ridiculous. Of course I wouldn't do that. And this suggests that they could force me to do so. I'm a writer. They're a client. I have to write the book that they want me to write. That doesn't make any sense. That's completely insane. Obviously, this is a much more simplified form of communication, messaging on a cake, or a cake that expresses a certain idea. But nevertheless, you're communicating an idea. That's it. That's what this boils down to. Now, the reason this is so annoying is because I think that for a long time, people have had this idea that this case in particular, if you know about it, right? The idea that, well, okay, he shouldn't be forced to write something on the cake like being gay is awesome or something like that, but he should be able to provide them a cake. And that's been his position as well, right? That his position is I should be able to do that. And so these guys are constantly harassing him by saying, oh, you're denying us business. But he isn't really. He's just not putting the expression that they want on the cake. Now, if they want to write something on the cake after he sells it to them, that's fine. They can totally do that. He can sell them a white cake, like a kind of a canvas, and then they can write whatever they want on the cake. He just won't write what they want him to write. And now they're just trying to find various other ways to communicate the ideas they want communicated, and they're trying to force him to implement that kind of communication, right? But creating the cake in a particular color scheme as a means of communication, it's still communicating the idea, right? Whether or not it's disguised in this kind of symbolism or not, right? It's sort of like asking him, okay, well, you won't write this in English, but could you write it in Spanish? And if he says no, then they're like, okay, back to court. We're going to sue this guy. Okay. Yes, we lost the case when he wouldn't write it in English, but now it's different because now we asked him to write it in Spanish. It's like, well, that doesn't really make any difference, right? Okay, so now we get into it, right? Now we get into the reason why I wanted to make this video, which was to express what I believe is the distinction between this and Twitter and YouTube and Facebook censoring people like me. You might say, well, if this guy, has the right to refuse service to people who are trying to force him to write things that he doesn't write or communicate ideas he doesn't want communicated, why should Twitter allow conservatives to communicate stuff on their platforms that they don't agree with? Well, the platform of social media does not express any particular idea, right? The actual Twitter website doesn't communicate anything. It's a platform for other people to communicate. So Twitter is a service that's provided that is refused. They refuse to serve people with certain ideas, people who believe things that they don't agree with, that they think are wrong. They're doing exactly what people are accusing this guy of inappropriately, right? Jack Phillips is not denying service to anyone. He's not writing himself certain things, on the cakes that he's providing. Twitter, on the other hand, Twitter isn't providing a service in which it expresses things and you commission them to do so. Twitter is essentially providing you with the white cake and then you write what you want on it, right? Which Jack has totally agreed to do. We're not forcing anyone at Twitter to violate their beliefs by writing anything that they disagree with. They just have to provide us with the blank slate upon which we can write whatever we want. And they are discriminating against conservatives. The same with YouTube, the same with Facebook. We're not forcing anyone at YouTube to produce videos that they disagree with, right? That's not what the public wants. That's not what conservatives want. We just want to be given the right to express ourselves. If Jack had said, okay, I'm going to produce this cake for you, but I'm somehow going to stop you from writing anything or modifying the cake in any way, right? You're not allowed to change that by communicating a message I disagree with. That would be different. Of course, he doesn't have the capability to do that. That's not really practical. But it is a practical thing to do on social media. On social media, they can actually block your account. They can stop you. They can censor you. They can limit your reach in a way that stops your message from being competitive against other people's messages. And with YouTube and Facebook and Twitter, they're specifically stopping people from communicating ideas they believe. They're limiting your free speech rights. Now, I've commonly compared YouTube and Facebook and Twitter to other kinds of utilities. This is an argument that I didn't invent, but it's a great one. It's a great idea. This idea that YouTube and Facebook and Twitter should be treated as utilities because they are so important to the public discourse, especially with regard to politics. So what's an example of a utility? Let's take garbage removal, sanitation. The city provides sanitation services to everyone. So it says, okay, in this part of the city, we're going to give the contract to this sanitation company. You guys are going to go around. You're going to pick up the garbage of everybody in this region. We're going to pay you a certain amount every year to do that. It's very lucrative. These businesses come in and they bid for these jobs. And then if they get the job, then they make a bunch of money. Okay, great. But the guy who runs that company can't say, oh, I went to high school with one of the guys in my district. I didn't like him. He was a bully. I'm not going to pick up his garbage. I'm just going to let his garbage pile up around his business, and we're going to suffocate his business in the stench of garbage until he goes bankrupt. A sanitation company cannot do that. That's illegal. All right. They can do that if you don't pay your bill, but that's the only way, right? So if Twitter or Facebook or YouTube had some kind of like pay system and you didn't pay, of course you wouldn't be able to access their site. But in the same way as a sanitation company can't refuse service to people, I think that at least for political reasons, YouTube should not be able to constrict your free expression. They shouldn't be able to put you on a sort of different algorithm or in any way modify the way that your expression is distributed on their platform compared to everybody else. YouTube picks winners and losers. If you're in the mainstream media, your stuff gets promoted like crazy. If you're somebody like me, who is an independent voice, and I always have views that YouTube disagrees with, I am unpersoned, right? They they basically erase me from existence. It's going to be very difficult for most people to find this video. They're not going to get recommended. Only a small percentage of my subscriber base will be recommended, which is actually why I started another channel called Mr. Pagan. So, I mean, it's a comedy channel. So if you like comedy and you want to see that, please subscribe to that channel. But yeah, so because, I think it's a lot more difficult to justify the censorship of satire or parody, any kind of comedy. So I'm starting that channel. That channel is going to certainly express various views, but it's going to be comedy. It's going to be comedy. It's going to be satire. And, I think that'll be difficult for YouTube to censor, at least to justify doing so. So far, all of the censorship that I've received is totally unjustified. I was banned from YouTube for 1 week for reading a headline. And I didn't even agree with the headline. It was a headline about COVID, where this Iranian cleric had said something to his people about COVID and what it will turn you into. So I read this headline and I laughed about it, right? And or Valeria read the headline and I laughed at it. And YouTube was like, "Oh, you're spreading misinformation." Well, I was, of course, not spreading misinformation. I was laughing at it. It was an absurd idea. It was very clearly an absurd idea. I actually talked about this news story on another channel, and I thoroughly ridiculed this idea, and I said that it wasn't true and everything like that, and they still censored me on that channel for the same reason. And I'm like, how can you do that? So now not only can you not spread disinformation, so-called, on YouTube, but you can't even criticize misinformation. If you say something that is clearly false on YouTube and you say this is clearly false, YouTube will erroneously flag you as having spread that idea. It's totally disingenuous. They know that's not true, right? Because I go in and I challenge it and I say, look, I'm not spreading this idea. I'm contradicting it. I'm saying that's wrong. So I challenge their strike. They call it a strike, right? I'm challenging their strike, but they don't care. They don't care. They look at it and they do a manual review and they say, nope, we think you're spreading this disinformation. But I said that that's not true and that nobody should believe that or nobody could believe it because it's ridiculous. Nope, you're promoting this idea. No, I'm clearly not, but they don't care. They don't care. So that's how YouTube comes after us. And, this is kind of the same thing. Like, this guy's freedom of expression is being attacked. And this is what the left does. They pretend that they're protecting their own freedom of expression by attacking other people's freedom of expression. They look at it sort of like they look at the economy. They consider it like a zero-sum game. There's only so much free speech available in the world, and this is how much conservatives get. This is how much leftists get. And, these leftists are trying to steal some of the conservative free expression. But that's not how free expression works, right? You can have an infinite amount of free expression. It's not confined by the pie. It's not 100% available and you get whatever percentage you get. No. There's an infinite amount of free expression available. As long as you can come up with a new idea, you can express something else, and you grow the pie. You grow the amount of free expression that there is in the world by simply coming up with new ideas. And all of these ideas interact in the market of ideas, in the free market of ideas, and they compete for dominance, and whatever people believe is right, those are the ideas that win out. And these leftists, though, they want to force people to express the ideas that they believe. You have every platform available to you to express your ideas, as long as you're a leftist, really. Conservatives don't. So, and that's really the point here, right? If you're a leftist and you go to a bake shop that doesn't want to bake cakes that express gay ideas, just order a white cake and then write whatever you want on it. This person, sure, shouldn't discriminate in terms of not providing you with a product, but he shouldn't be forced to express an idea that he doesn't agree with. And I don't believe that Twitter should be forced to express ideas that they don't agree with. I mean, nobody at Twitter should be forced to say that they support Trump if they don't. Nobody at YouTube should be forced to express certain ideas about Christianity being correct if they're an atheist or something like that. I don't think people should be forced to express ideas they don't believe. To me, that's a ridiculous notion anyway. It's a ridiculous idea to force people to express ideas they don't believe, because why would you do that? What does that help in the world? It doesn't help anything. It's a weird thing to think is a good idea, but leftists think that's a good idea. Leftists think that Christians need to express ideas about, how amazing Satan is, or, ideas about how fantastic being gay is or being trans is. if you don't believe those things, it's very weird to me that somebody would think that it's a good idea to force you to express this idea that you don't believe. It's an incredibly sort of violent impulse. Really, to demand somebody. I mean, could you imagine, somebody hiring you for a speech? Listen, I want to hire you for a speech. Okay, great. What do you want me to speak on? I want you to speak on LGBTQ issues. Okay, fantastic. If I don't believe that being trans is a good idea, then I'm going to have to do the speech and say, I don't think being trans is a good idea. But if they then give you the speech and say, you need to say these things about how amazing being trans is, I need to have the ability to back out and say, well, I can't give that speech. I can give a speech to you. I can present a speech, but it's not going to be that one. But then I get this image of them sort of like moving your mouth, and beating you and forcing you to say the things that they want you to say. I mean, it's like the weirdest idea to me, this idea that you would want to force somebody to express an idea that they don't agree with. I don't understand that impulse, really. I mean, it's a completely irrational impulse. It's the violent impulse of the leftist mob. They feel entitled to everything at this point. It's the most bizarre thing. I think it amounts to a desire to have control over other people, right? They want to control everything. And I think it's that same impulse that drives them to be socialist, to be communist. Because if you're a communist, then all the power is centralized. So the people in control have all the power over you, and they can basically create the world that they want to create. Now, this inevitably ends in absolute tragedy and disaster, but I don't think the people in control mind that. They don't mind some people suffering and dying if it means that things get to be exactly how they want it, right? If they don't want to see Christian symbolism, they don't want to see churches, they don't want to pass by churches, then they want to be in control of the state so that they can bulldoze all the churches so they don't have to drive past them ever. Now, if some people are starving to death because of their policies, to them, that's a perfectly acceptable consequence of what they're doing, a side effect of what they're doing, because they don't want to see the churches. So it's this impulse to have a very tight control over everything. They want to control you. They want to control everything in society. And that's just not the way that the United States works. The United States works on principles of freedom and liberty. The concept of the United States of America is that we can pursue happiness. And, the really bizarre thing about this is that the LGBT folks say, that if you're gay, you should be able to be gay because this person's pursuit of happiness. Or if you're trans, you should be able to be trans because that's that person's pursuit of happiness. But on the other hand, they say, well, if you're a Christian, well, no. You can't be Christian because that contradicts my views. That stops me from pursuing my happiness because you won't bake the cakes that I demand that you bake. And what you're finding more and more is that groups that don't like Christians, groups that don't like white people, groups that don't like men are going around and forcing men to say things that they don't agree with, forcing white people to, say things they don't agree with. That's what critical race theory is. And in this case, forcing Christians to say things that they don't agree with. It's like a lot of the things that go on with the left. Like they're very racist against white people. And the justification that they claim for hating white people, for being racist against white people, is that, well, white people are racist, so it's okay to be racist against them, right? They all think that they're the Dexter of racism, of ethics, right? Dexter is the show about a serial killer who went around murdering other serial killers, right? He had this compulsion to kill, and so what did he do? He sought out other serial killers and then killed them. That's how he indulged his compulsion, by murdering serial killers. And that's how the left thinks. The left thinks they're doing something that's perfectly okay because they're simply attacking the people that they think are attacking others, right? So in a sense, they're defending other people. The problem with this, and this is always the problem with the whole eye for an eye concept, the whole idea of saying, well, you're a rapist, so you should be raped, right? You're a thief, so I should be able to steal everything that you have. You're a racist, so I'm going to be racist against you. The problem is that sometimes you find somebody who is not actually the criminal you think they are. They have been erroneously accused of the crime. Now, in the criminal justice system, we have the whole court system to determine innocence or guilt. But in the court of public opinion, we don't really have the same kinds of processes that we do in the judicial system. We just have people who point and make claims, make accusations, and then a lot of people believe them, and then they say, okay, we're going to go, this is going to be mob justice, right? Mob justice. When you murder somebody in a mob for mob justice, vigilante justice, that's called a lynching, right? And so the left has essentially formed lynch mobs online, and they go around and they find people that they think disagree with their position, that they think, okay, you're a bigot, you're a racist, you hate trans people, whatever it is, and they go and they say, now we're going to attack this person in every possible way we can because they disagree with our political views, and they justify it by saying, well, you're actually the bad person, and we're the good people, and so attacking you is just fine. But what they don't recognize is the people they're attacking are usually not actually bad people. Christians aren't bigots. White people are not racist. Men are not misogynists. So when you just have this idea in your head, all men are misogynists so that I can hate men. If you have this idea in your head, all white people are racist so I can hate white people. If you have this idea in your head, all Christians are homophobic so I can hate Christians, well, you're wrong about all those things. You're wrong about those people being bigots, and you yourself have just turned yourself into a bigot, and you've just justified it with a lie. And ironically, the social media companies actually do the same thing. They totally justify this kind of behavior, they tolerate this kind of behavior, and they themselves target people for harassment. They target people for censorship. They hurt people. They take away their livelihood. You know, you make a lot less money when you get 20,000 views on a video than if you get 200,000 views on a video. And that's the situation I'm in right now. So YouTube is actively trying to destroy my businesses because they disagree with ideas that I have about the world, just like this law firm is trying to destroy this bakery because they disagree that this guy is a Christian. They disagree with his Christian views. And so this is the struggle that we're under as conservatives, and I just thought I'd react to this article and this situation and try to make that distinction so that when you guys are talking to people and they say, oh, you think that the Christian baker shouldn't have to bake the cake, but you think that social media should have to allow you to post on their site, you say yes. Because the Christian baker does need to bake you the cake. He just doesn't have to bake you a cake with the message you want. And Twitter does have to provide you a platform to express your ideas. They just don't have to express the ideas themselves. The difference is saying you can't discriminate in terms of providing the service, but you don't actually have to write what other people want you to write, to express what people want you to express, right? People shouldn't be allowed to grab your hand, put a pen in it, and force you to write the things that you don't want to write. That is what's going on here. It's the difference between forcing somebody to express something they don't believe and simply selling a product to somebody that doesn't express any message at all. This is the distinction. I hope I was clear, and anyway, I hope this made sense. All right, guys. Well, that's it for me. Remember, I have a new channel. It's called Mr. Pagan. It's stupid comedy stuff. It's all the comedy stuff you normally would have seen on here on Mr. Reagan. I put it all on a new channel, and I've done that because I think it's a little bit more difficult to censor comedy. So if you want to help me out there, I still need quite a few hours of views in order to monetize that channel. So if you'd watch a video, if you really like it, maybe share it. That would really help me out. All right, well, that's it for me for this episode. And remember, it's not that our liberal friends are ignorant. It's just that they're all oppressive. All right, guys, I will see you next time. Good night.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
President, in talking about the continuing recession tonight, you have blamed mistakes of the past, and you have blamed the Congress. Does any of the blame belong to you?
Yes, because for many years I was a Democrat.